Thanks for listening to the Lakers Fast Break podcast, part of the Hoopheads Podcast Network. Check out all their awesome basketball shows today at hoopheadspod.com. We're back for another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our shows. And if you can, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Plus, if you can like, share, subscribe, follow, or do anything that you can to support us right here at the Lakers Fast Break, Lakerholics.com. And also the awesome network, which is full of great basketball podcasts in the Hoopheads Podcast Network, is sincerely appreciated. Well, I thought during the downtime I'd go ahead and have some good conversations. I know I had one recently with my good friend Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and, of course, the Locked On NBA Draft Podcast. I just caught up with his few that he just put out this week. So I've got a podcast player, my bullhorn player, got that lined up, got that checked out. All right, listen. Another great set of episodes from him this week. But all of a sudden I realized I have to go out and check out another awesome draft podcast because Upside Swings needs to be also in your listening content because I've got one of the co-hosts here today, a man who started off pre-podcast with us. Now he is a podcaster himself. He's a good man indeed. He also is a tremendous Lakers fan. It is Stone Hansen. And Stone, great to have you back on the program once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Like you said, I never had really any podcast experience actually before coming on yours. So to be able to use that to launch into my own is exciting. So thank you for helping me with that.
Oh, no worries, man. Just if you know how to if you have the gift for gab and you love to talk, and you have a passion for what you're talking about, there you go. Only thing I would suggest is just be consistent with your audience on when you go ahead and put out shows. I mean, if you're like Lakers Fast Break, I mean, you're putting out 5 shows a week. That's pretty good for them. Hard for them to keep up sometimes, and I apologize for that. But, when the Lakers play, we gotta play too. But when it comes to having a regular show that's not based like the Lakers Fast Break after every game and whatnot, I would say that's the best advice I could give would be just to be consistent with your audience. So I wish you tremendous success. If there's anything you need me to do to help support it, like I do for Michael Weisenberg's great show, Viceland, also as well, Rafael Barlow and what he's done for NBA Draft Junkies, let me know. I'm happy to help on that. Yeah, I mean, I'm just wishing you tremendous upswing with your show as well. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
I want to throw a first question off to you, totally off the base. Little Nas X recently put out some shoes, not in conjunction with Nike. I got to make sure, not in conjunction with Nike, but they were based off of Nike shoes with satanic theme and blood on the bottom as far as built in the bottom of the shoe. I think he released all 1,000 before Nike said, please don't attach that to us. And they went, they filed lawsuit against Little Nas X and the company behind, I forget what the company's name is. Hold on a second. Let me check that. MSCHF is the company that he was dealing with on that. And it turns out that after some conversations that Nike dropped the suit, but they made sure to let everybody know we're not in any way, shape, or form responsible with it. And you can return those shoes that you just bought, and you can return them back at any point in time. So with no problems at all. But if the blood on the bottom breaks on the shoes, that's all on you, and you need to talk to MSCHF. You don't talk to us. But the only reason I'm asking you is you're buying some satanic blood on the bottom shoes that are Nike shoes. You've got to be a speaker aficionado, or B, someone who's not very religious, and or both. I have a feeling you're not sending those shoes back. You want them to go ahead and you're pretty much betting on them to collect nice returns somewhere down the line at an auction.
Yeah, I'm not too much of a sneakerhead myself, but I know a lot of people will buy those and hope down the line it turns into a good investment for them. So
yeah, they're not wearing them. You're
yeah.
not going them and taking them down. Just you're playing pickup with Stone or me or whatnot, and you're trying them on. Hey, man, what's going on? Oh, I'm just putting on my satanic shoes. No worries. Just give me a second here just to tighten up the laces there. But yeah, it's just interesting because Nike says you can return them. I have a feeling there's not going to be many returns because there's only 1,000 of them out there. So I have a feeling in 10, 15 years down the line, like you said, the sneakerhead industry, which again is a major industry out there. People just, the things we collect in society is amazing. And you will probably see somewhere down the line, 10, 15 years down the line, some pretty heavy duty dollars for those little Nas X sneakers, I have a feeling. But yeah, it's just something that just saw the actual settlement and things of that nature. And I'm thinking like, okay, if I'm buying those satanic shoes, I'm not returning them.
Yeah, hopefully they turn into a good profit for those that did buy them.
Oh, I imagine they will be. I imagine they will be, especially if you can get them autographed by. Because I don't think they're autographed by Little Nas X. If you can get them, if you can get them autographed by Little Nas X, yeah, there you go. There's a chunk of change there for you. But getting off the Devil's shoes now, we're going to be talking about the Lakers because you are a super Lakers fan like I am, and it's so great to have you on the show. But I want to ask you this. I mean, the Lakers right now sit in a position where, you're going to do the best they can while LeBron and AD are still out. AD's probably going to be out for at least another week. Maybe he's, right around the 15th, they're talking about him possibly coming back to the court. And maybe a couple weeks later, LeBron, you hear the rumors, you hear the innuendo of when that could possibly be. You see the pictures of LeBron walking now without a boot. And you see all the good things that could possibly happen from there. But, do you want to rush them back to the floor? Right now, the Lakers sit, I believe, in 5th place right now in the Western Conference. But it's going to be a dogfight to see if they can still keep in and around that area. But once they get back and they come to full strength, do you still see them as the favorite in the Western Conference?
I would still personally have them as a favorite. I'm trying to leave out any bias or anything, but I think it's a lot closer than it was at the start of the season. I think these injuries, it leaves a lot more room for question on re-injuries if any of these guys go down with any other possible things. The Clippers weren't that far off to begin with this season. They weren't too far away from the Lakers, and I think that gap has closed even more since these injuries. So they're narrowly my Western Conference favorites, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I never thought that big chasm, which everybody was talking about at the beginning of the season, was as big as everybody would make it out to be, and that they thought it was going to be the Lakers and everybody else. I know that the Lakers are still, to me, going to be the favorite with a healthy LeBron and AD, especially the fact the way they play defense, even in their absence. I think they've been playing excellent defense. Offense is still obviously an issue with them. Generating any type of offense consistently is still a big problem for the team without those two in the lineup. But as a defensive side of things in the playoffs, as you know, as we saw last year in the bubble, defense is at a premium, and defense really gets you or keeps you in the ball game no matter who it is against. And if you have talents like LeBron and AD finishing out your games, plus that defense, they've got a really great shot to win it, even this year.
Yeah, definitely. The defense is something that surprised me that they were able to continue as strong as they were the year previous. And to be able to continue it while LeBron and Anthony Davis have gone out is really impressive. But as you mentioned, the offense is kind of the concern right now. Not a whole lot of creation, I think, outside of Schroeder. So I think that's something they were hoping to address more of last offseason, and hopefully they can address it again this offseason.
Well, I'm hoping that they will. In fact, that's one thing I wanted to ask you on before we get into your specialty. And remember, Stone Hansen also has written work out there on lines.com. You just go to lines.com, head over to where the NBA draft is, and all that page is his with his latest mock draft, which there are some questions I have on it. I wanted to ask you this first off before we get into that, because the Lakers do own their draft choice, and I think they are being forced just by the stepping rule to go ahead and actually draft and possibly keep. You never know. I mean, I'm sure at some point in time they can trade. There's a point in time that you can trade your rookie, but right now they have to go ahead, at least go ahead and draft him and retain that draft choice. But we'll get into that here in a bit. But first off, some things probably need to be done during the summer to help shore up the deficiencies that the team has. Three-point shooting, playmaking ability. I know those are things that are at the top of the list. So if you were Rob Pelinka's shoes and you were the GM of the Lakers, what are you targeting at this point for this offseason?
I think my first step would be try to retain Dennis Schroeder because you have his bird rights this year, so that kind of helps you in terms of I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of other point guards they'll be able to get that are better that they can afford because of those bird rights that Schroeder has. So I think trying to retain him between that $20 to like $23 million range is somewhat understandable. Anything more than that seems really expensive for him. Then you have some more questions about that. 3-point shooting is something to address as well. I know they just signed Ben McLemore. That was a nice pickup. Hopefully he pans out for them a little bit. But getting guys like that are kind of bargain bin deals that hopefully can provide some extra spacing and things of that nature would help them a lot, I think, as well.
Could you utilize, once you sign Dennis Schroeder? I mean, I'm sure, I know you sign him to a contract. I mean, he's already been offered a 4-year, $84 million deal, and he's looking to see if he can get more out in the marketplace. But once you sign him, I know there's a point in time during the course of the season where he becomes eligible. Do you then try to flip his contract for something maybe a little bit more substantial?
It depends who's on the market, I think. Schroeder's I view him as kind of a middle-of-the-road point guard. He's not, great, but he's probably better than a lot of what the Lakers can get at the moment. If another point guard, of maybe Kyle Lowry's sort of tier, and you could throw in maybe a first or in 2027 or something like that, I think I would do that if I'm the Lakers. But yeah, it's pretty dependent, I think, on who's available.
No, I agree with you. So I'm hoping that they will go ahead and retain Dennis Schroeder. I think there's a thing that, like you said, it's going to be a lack of availability of top tier or even middle tier point guards out there because they're running at a premium right now. So we'll wait and see what happens with that.
This is Raphael from NBA DraftJunkies.com, and you are listening to the Lakers Fast Break.
Hey, hoopheads, we all hate ankle sprains, and they happen way too often. Ankle injuries are the #1 sports-related injury. Arise is trying to change that. With the iFast, your athletes get preventative protection and full mobility. Athletes no longer need to wear bulky braces that limit performance and give mediocre protection. Anyone playing sports should be using these products. Keep your athletes in the game. Don't wait for them to get hurt to take action. Visit www.arise.com, spelled ARYSE, and use the code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off the future of performance. That's ARYSE.com with promo code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off.
But again, 3-point shooting, as Laker Tom of Lakerholics.com screams on every single episode of ours that we do together, is something that the Lakers do need. And obviously it's very apparent each and every time out that they go ahead and struggle from the 3-point area, or at least some volume 3-point shooting consistently. That's also an area that I know he wants to address. But I wanted to ask you this, when it comes to the draft, I know on the back end, we'll get into your whole draft mock-up here in a second because I have some questions overall with that. But when it comes to that point in the draft where the Lakers might choose, it's going to be a little bit more advantageous with the Lakers because they will be a little bit higher up they'll be in the low 20s. They're projected to right now, as opposed to the higher 20s or at number 30. So I want to hear your thoughts on who might be available at that point in time, because I have some ideas myself, but I want to hear your thoughts on who you think might be available at that point in time.
Yeah, I think as last year we were at the same place, I think, where playmaking and three-point shooting are still kind of the main needs for them. And thankfully this year, again, it's a pretty deep draft in terms of point guards as well. So I think there's going to be some point guards that the Lakers should look at. One of them, who may or may not be in that range, is Trey Mann. He's a guy that's flown up the board since the tournament. I talked about him actually on my last podcast on Upside Swings about he's kind of a do-it-all point guard in terms of everything you want from a point guard. He can shoot from all three levels, play, make, defend. So there's really not a whole lot that to knock him on. It's just that I'm not exactly sure if he's someone that the Lakers could utilize immediately in terms of helping them win during this championship window. But he's someone I definitely would target in that range. Another guy I would consider looking at would be Josh Giddy, another guy who's similar to Trey Mann, has flown up boards recently. I'm not exactly sure where his range is. Hopefully it'll be in that low 20s area. But he's a 6'8" point guard, massive point guard. He's one of the weirdest evaluations I've ever done. Really unorthodox player. Kind of plays almost like just at a super slow pace. He can defend well, which fits into the Lakers system. 3-point shooting is probably one of the concerns that you may have going into it. But he is one of the better playmakers of the draft. So I think that he does fit in well there with the Lakers as well.
Excellent court vision, but I do have those same concerns. But he is rising up draft boards. I've seen him as high as 9th on draft boards, and I've seen him as low as a 30 to 31 on the back end of the first and going into the second round. So he is all over the place on draft boards. He has been considered up until this past week, 10 days, as the top international prospect. Although after talking with both yourself that I'm about ready to talk about, and also as well Rafael Barlow, I know the kid from Turkey, Alperen Sengun, he has actually risen so quickly up draft boards that 1 week he wasn't there. I saw him on the back end of the second round. So I saw him on maybe even reaching the first round. Now he's talked about as far as a high lottery draft choice, like right around 7, 8. I've seen him as high as that. So I know that he's someone that a lot of people have really caught their eyes on. What are your thoughts on him? You think he could actually fall down that far? I mean, and should the Lakers take him if that's the case?
Yeah, I think right now it's kind of same thing with Giddy, I would say. During the draft process, players have different stocks, like actual stocks, and they kind of rise and fall a bit, fluctuate until we get to the actual draft. So I think right now Sengun's stock is probably as high as it'll get. I don't expect him to really go top 10 or anything like that. I'd expect maybe in the 12 to 20 range is probably more likely where he'll go. So I would say he's not top end lottery, although at this point people seem to perceive him that way. For the Lakers, I think he does fit in well in terms of being a 3-point shooter at the 5 position, someone who you hope can develop into a rim protector as well. There's a lot of questions for the Lakers in terms of their center position. So I'm not entirely sure how big of a logjam he would create there. So I think we'd have to wait and see how the season ends just to kind of evaluate how he'd fit with the Lakers.
You're right, because you're not sure about the, tenure of guys like Montrezl Harrell, Andre Drummond, and Marc Gasol to see if they will actually stay with the team next year or not. So definitely that's something to look into. And if the Lakers have that opportunity to get a kid like that, if they have that gaping hole, we'll see what happens. But you're right. They do have playmaking issues. They have shooting issues. Josh Giddy, who is all over draft boards as well, the kid from Australia. I've been watching a lot of footage on him over the past 2 weeks, and I have been impressed as far as his court vision. His shooting stroke, again, is going to be a big concern. His athleticism, I know people are going to be getting on his case about consistently. Although we saw that from a kid named Luka Doncic, if I remember correctly, a lot of those same discussions as well. Although with him, I saw a little bit more burst when he was playing in Euroball. I think that was something that popped out a little bit more to me. I think with Josh, like you said, he slows it down. Even when he's playing, in a fast break motion, he seems like he's going on at a speed all of his own.
Yeah, definitely. He's one of the Kyle Anderson type players where they like to just play at their own pace. They don't have great athleticism, so they tend to be able to control the game the way they want in half-court sets and things like that. He does have excellent vision, as you have mentioned. He's able to get those skip passes across, able to see guys off motion, off the dribble. He can find cutters. He's a pretty weird evaluation, one of the weirder ones I've seen in recent memory.
One of the players that you have on your list in and around that area where the Lakers could be drafting is Davion Mitchell, one of the big stars for Baylor in this championship game that they just had. They were victorious over Gonzaga. And I don't think he'll be anywhere. He is of the guys like you talked about with stocks. Right now their status with all these draft choices, they're like stocks. Who's going up, who's going down after evaluations, after they go ahead and have the private sessions and they talk with the agents and then interview these kids. I think that right now, before that happens, and based off of his performances in the NCAA tournament, I think Davion Mitchell is the highest riser right now because I've seen him as high as 6th, right, in some certain mock drafts. So you have him a little bit lower now. Do you have a feeling you might be going up a little bit higher?
Yeah, definitely. He's one of those where I think the stock is legitimate in terms of the rise. I don't think he's one of the guys where, the stock kind of goes up for a couple of weeks and drops back down again. I think Mitchell's will stay relatively high. I may have placed him a little low on the latest mock draft because I think he's probably somewhere in the lottery, I would think. Although there's a lot of guys kind of clustered together.
Yeah.
So I think we could see someone like him or maybe Sharif Cooper, one of those point guards, drop a little further than we expect. Davion Mitchell, I am a fan of in terms of maybe picking him up somewhere in the 20s where the Lakers may pick. But I think he's going to go further ahead than where the Lakers will be. He's a bit older as a prospect, one of the older prospects in the draft, actually. A really strong defender. You saw Mike Schmitz on ESPN say that he was the strongest defender he's ever evaluated, or one of. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. He's kind of undersized at like 6'2". I have some questions and concerns about him. I actually like his teammate Jared Butler a little bit better. But Mitchell will definitely be the guy that goes ahead of him, and probably somewhere in the 12 to 15 range, I would assume.
I agree with you on that. I think I need some more evaluation on him before I can actually find a good spot for him, but I see him right between that 15 to 25 area right now is where I'm looking at for him. He may be there for the Lakers, but I probably wouldn't count on it if people are really hoping for it. But there's a lot of prospects that are there that are, like you said, in that mix for that upper echelon of the of this lottery area, because after the first 5 picks, I think that are clear cut. Although Raphael was saying that maybe Jonathan Kuminga may or may not stay at number 5. I think he's going to stay at number 5, but you've got a ton of individuals that are there. Like you see Scotty Barnes, Franz Wagner. You see the kids from Tennessee. You see a lot of individuals. Corey Kissbert. That's one I wanted to ask you about. Corey did not showcase himself very well in the past 2 games, the championship game and the game against UCLA. He was a little bit hesitant to do what he, or at least a lot of people like me, thinks he does best in shooting the rock from 3. He was kind of a little bit gun shy. And his defense was not as good as I had hoped. What are your thoughts on him still being somewhere picked in the lottery?
I personally am actually much lower on Kissbert than a lot of people. The way I approach my mock drafts are kind of thinking how teams may think, and not necessarily my own. So right now I do have him going pretty high, I think at number 7, because I think teams still tend to overvalue shooters. And what I mean by that is as the rest of the league gets better at shooting, I don't think these premium sharpshooters are necessarily as valuable as they once may have been. But I don't think front offices have caught up with that line of thinking yet. So they still value them quite a bit. And I think as possibly one of the best shooters in the draft, he certainly has the pedigree of that he will go higher than he should. Probably, I would assume, top 12 at this point in time. Definitely lottery, I would think. But yeah, a team that I think is in more of a win now position may view him and his shooting as something they can use to push forward into the playoffs this upcoming season.
I agree with you, Dan. I see him if there is a team like a Toronto, like you have on lines.com, or a team that has more of a win now that maybe had a bad year like Toronto, or another team that could make the playoffs next year and compete that's having a down season now, could go for Corey Kissbert, or like definitely I would think that they would consider Davion Mitchell. I think that would go. I know he's 22, but I think he is, if he doesn't go at 6, 7, 8, I think he's going to go to a team very high up that had a down year like Toronto, because I think he is more of a win now type of candidate as well.
Yeah, teams you could look at probably making another playoff push next year would be the Warriors and probably the Pelicans I would put in that mix. Definitely the Spurs as always. So those sort of teams may be looking at those older players just as more win now type guys, but we'll see where they end up in the draft.
We're signaling the ref for a quick timeout, but we'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
The better that these Marvel films do, the higher the standards are going to be for not just other films in general, but other Marvel films also.
I think it's really hard to end a show with this many fans in a satisfying way.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse.
Playing worldwide on radio 7 days a week and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm talking to Stone Hansen. You got to check out what he's doing today at lines.com under the NBA draft section, and also as well his awesome new podcast, which I got to check out. I didn't even know until the last few minutes. I'm like looking at his handle, his profile, and saying, oh, what's this? I got to go ahead and check it out. I got to put it on my bullhorn. It is called Upside Swings. So Upside Swings, the podcast, you got to check that out today. Wherever you get your podcast, they just landed on Apple, so there's no excuse for another great podcast that covers the NBA draft. You got to go ahead and check out Upside Swings. Tell me a little bit more about the show before we head on out, my friend.
Yeah, I've been wanting to actually kind of start my own podcast for a while. I think I mentioned it to you before, and kind of just more of a draft-centric podcast, because there are definitely some out there, but I think there's still more room for more podcasts that are draft-centric to come out. So it's just something I started with Bryce Hendricks and Ryan Davis, which are two guys that I've talked draft with for a bit, and they're also really knowledgeable about this subject. So we actually have another episode or two coming out this weekend, talking about more prospects, maybe more draft philosophy that we kind of dive into. So yeah, it's just something that I have a lot of thoughts on the draft, so I figured I might as well talk about them and share them with other people.
Well, definitely you got to check that out, and I am going to be, because I just caught up with Raphael's shows. I've just caught up with Mikey V's shows. I now got to catch up this weekend with your awesome shows. That is Upside Swings. You got to catch it today on everywhere you get your podcast. And, of course, you need to go ahead and check out everything that he's doing with his mock drafts. When would your next one be up? After, because obviously you got one that you just put up with lines.com, but when do you have a feeling? Maybe 2-3 weeks down the line?
Yeah, I'm hoping within the next week or two having another one up, but we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I'll start putting out some scouting reports on some of these guys as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Definitely looking forward to what you bring to the table when it concerns that and everything on the draft at lines.com, plus your show Upside Swings. But my friend, it's been great talking to you. Obviously, you're welcome back at any point in time, but any last thoughts on the Lakers as a fellow Lakers fan before we head on out?
I'm excited to see how Andre Drummond kind of fits in with them. I know he's only had a couple games with them, so I'm kind of excited to see how he fits in with AD and LeBron once they're back. Hopefully they can stay above the 6th seed so they don't have to go in the play-in tournament.
You and I both, my friend. You and I both. Maybe we can go ahead and provide some of those other teams some of those satanic shoes that Little Nas X put out. So maybe give them some like bad luck or something. So hopefully that will help.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. Absolutely, indeed. Once again, it is Stone Hansen from Lines.com and also his great show, Upside Swings. Please check it out today wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions for me, it's at Lakers Fast Break on Twitter. With Stone, follow him at report_court, and he's got one of the hilarious profile pictures right there for you, covering with the Lakers. I see the Schroeder influence there, but I will tell you what, my friend, it's been great talking to you. I look forward to more great conversations down the road, talking the Lakers, talking the NBA draft, and obviously checking out your shows. But I mean, any last thoughts on the draft or anything else on the NBA before we head on out?
I think that's it. I think we covered everything we set out to. So appreciate you having me on again, and look forward to coming back eventually.
Absolutely. Again, it's up to you, man. The red carpet is always out there for you. I want to get with you next time on the NBA draft. A little bit more of that, obviously, but also as well the NBA as a whole. Who you're liking on the Eastern Conference? Is there anyone that's a real major threat to the Lakers in the Western Conference? Because there's so many contenders right now. There's so many things to discuss, and I'm looking forward to going ahead and doing that with you again when you're able to, when you stop by right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.